protection. Give me a minute. After you resolve.
Hey, welcome back to the channel. So in this episode, we're going to talk about DAYLON, and he could have been a really good Esper if not because of one single fatal flaw. So let's take a look at his skill. The first one attacks one enemy, damage 100% attack, 40% chance of inflicting bleed for 2 turns. You can increase the trigger chance to 60% and the damage to 120%. So the damage is actually normal, like that's the standard normal damage for the first skill, but the chance for the bleed is too low. It's only 60%. So you if you watch my other episodes, like you know that the 50-50 benchmark is at 75%. So 60% you cannot really rely on this skill on putting bleed debuff on your target. And going to the second skill, attacks one enemy, damage 180% attack. It can increase to 200%, which is actually quite high for a second skill, and there's a 75% chance of inflicting stun, and the trigger chance can be increased to 85% for 1 turn and defense down for 2 turns. If the enemy is not buffed, damage plus 10%. This one comes from his resonance, the resonance 6 there. When the target is buffed, this attack damage plus 10%. So the damage is actually quite high. It deals to one target, and it also has a quite alright percentage chance for a stun and defense down, although there are a lot of other Esper who can like guarantee you giving the enemy defense down, and also for some other stunners, like if you do actually want to stun someone, I prefer to kind of like bring Pritzker for that job. So 85% is actually not that enough for something like just only stun and defense down, which a lot of Esper can actually replace him in this department. So it's only damage that you want to aim from this skill. And then going into the third skill, attacks all enemies, damage 90% attack. You can increase it to 110%, which is alright, like 10% higher than usual AoE damage, and 75% chance of dispelling all buffs and debuffs from targets, and inflicts disease for 2 turns. So this is the fatal flaw of his skill. Like it is good to have an Esper that can actually dispel all buffs from all enemies, because so far we've only have 2 Espers that can do this. First is Raven and the second one is DAYLON. So DAYLON is kind of like the budget version of Raven, like he is the Raven at home that you don't need to worry about. But the chance is too low, like 75% means that you have 50-50 chance on whether this gonna take effect or not. And also it removes all debuffs from the targets, which means that you cannot really pair DAYLON up with a lot of Espers who rely a lot on debuffs, especially if you know me, like I love playing around with debuffs. So he is totally not an Esper that I do want to bring anywhere, because he gonna remove all the debuffs that I successfully applied to enemies. And also the chance of doing this is kind of like 50-50. So if you attack all 5 enemies, like at most only 2 or 3 Espers that can get hit by this thing, and sometimes those Espers are not the ones that you are aiming for. So it's totally not reliable, although the damage is quite alright, like 10% higher. So if you do want to use DAYLON, the only good thing from his skills are the damage and also the disease here. The disease is 100% chance, and it lasts for 2 turns. So this is good if you encounter like multiple genie in towers. Like I've seen, like nowadays the developer loves to put genies everywhere, like in every single content. So you do need a lot of disease Esper that can put disease. There are a lot of options. There are Joser, there are Embla, etc., but they usually only inflict disease to one single target, while they Daylon can put disease on all 5 enemies that last for 2 turns. But then again, because of his other skills and how he removes the debuffs that I already successfully put on all enemies, like most of the time instead of using him, I kind of like prefer Zora. Like Zora, even though she put disease only for 1 turn, but it comes from her first skill, so I can just keep on applying this disease to my targets, and also she is much more useful in terms of giving buff blocker, defense down, and then also dispelling buff from the enemy, giving herself speed, and also deal some damage, and also lifesteal so she can survive much longer in battle. So there are a lot of things that other Esper can do much better than DAYLON, and that's why his fatal flaw is in this one. If only the percentage is not 75%, I would think that DAYLON will stand a chance of becoming a really good Esper. Because for those of you who doesn't have Raven yet, he is your only choice of removing all buffs from all 5 enemies. Like nowadays we have problems against like Feng Sun, like he is the recently OP legendary Esper that is not a Simmer, and he gives a ton of buffs to his allies, and to remove all those buffs requires a lot of work, because most of the time Espers that can dispel buff only deal 3 times multi-hit attack on their AoE damage, like someone like Tricky, someone like who is the mummy snake, that one, I forgot her name. Those Esper can only remove like 3 buffs at most from each enemies, but for DAYLON's case, like he can remove all buffs. So there are a lot of strategy in PvP I've seen nowadays that gives a ton of buffs, like they pair Feng Sun with Mavis, with Gabriel, with Clara, etc. So every single enemies have more than 5 buffs, which is a lot of work to remove, and also it makes the enemy insanely strong if you don't do something about it. That's why buff blockers nowadays become more relevant, and DAYLON cannot do that, while Zora can put buff blocker on top of disease and also defense down, which everything we need to counter those kind of enemies, those enemies that stacks a ton of buffs. So yeah, this is the fatal flaw that I want to talk about. Like, hopefully in the future the developer gives a chance for DAYLON to shine, but the only thing that I would advise you to keep in mind is that he is the only Esper that has the ability to remove the enemy's debuffs. So if in any case, if for whatever reason or whatever purpose you need to remove a debuff from the enemy, then DAYLON is the only one who can do that. But I don't really think that there is a debuff that we don't want to be on our enemies, but we will see. We will never know, like if there's any new content that require that kind of mechanic. But otherwise, this is a very unique thing to have. I can probably understand that the developer want to give a disadvantage for DAYLON, because if he only have a 75% chance of dispelling all buffs, he gonna be like exactly a budget version of Raven, and people would have like kind of a little bit okay having 75% chance. Like they can just, if it's a PvE content, they can just keep on retrying again and again until they manage to hit all 5 enemies with this skill. But yeah, like they want to give some kind of a nerf to DAYLON so that he won't be that good. But apparently it makes him almost totally useless. I remember, like, before he make it into the championship, like before people got copy of him. I remember like the developer actually planned on giving him like 100% chance of dispelling all buffs, uh, but they kind of changed their mind on that. So yeah, let's go into the growth. So advancement, if you do aim for making him a damage dealer, like you can go at level 60. Like if you already reach endgame, then why not try to, level him up if you actually want to use him. But if you only aim for his dispel and disease, then level 50 is enough. The only thing he needs to do is that you gotta make sure that he moves first among all of your lineup, because otherwise he gonna remove the debuffs that you already put from your other allies if DAYLON move after them. So you do want him to move first, remove any buffs the enemy have, and then deal damage and also put disease on the target. Hopefully there are genies there, and then after that follow up by your other Esper to deal damage. This is quite nice because he deal quite some damage, like 110% AoE damage. So at the very least you can expect like 1/3 of the enemy's HP will be gone from DAYLON's attack alone. Now going into his resonance, we've already seen the 6 resonance. We're gonna go to the second one. It survive enemy grants accuracy plus 5%. This is alright, quite okay, because his abilities, the disease, the dispel, and then the stun, the defense down, all these things, the bleed, all require him to have accuracy. So this kind of help. And then going to the fourth resonance, upon successfully dispelling or stealing buffs, each buffs inflicts maximum HP capacity minus 3% on the targets. This is probably the silver lining that makes DAYLON actually quite alright as a sub DPS. But then again, you have a lot of alternatives rather than just bringing DAYLON to your lineup. Going into Ascension, his Ascension also doesn't really make sense. Like he has HP on the first one and then attack on the second one. Quite alright, like usually it's attack on the first and life on the second. And then there's an accuracy, critical rate, and attack. Not something that you have for a main DPS. Like I do hope there's a critical damage in here, but it is quite alright. Like you can already see that he is built for a secondary DPS, not a main DPS. And the third one is the one that gives you a chance of dispelling all buffs and debuffs from your target. So you definitely do want to get his third Ascension, because this is his best skill and best trait. And then going into his rival rune, the game developer also already put a hint here that make sure that DAYLON is the first one to move among all your lineup, and then giving him some growth set in here to increase his survivability, because he is a damage dealer, so his survivability is kind of like a problem. And going to his Divinate, also when the barrel's HP is full, double slash final damage get increased. I think it can be increased. Yeah, this is already the highest. This is 15% damage increase. So double slash is his second skill, so you can already see that his second skill gonna deal a ton of damage. So he, instead of doing like damage on the first turn using his third skill, he gonna deal more damage on his second turn to a single target in here. And if you want to know, like on max Lemu level, his attack is his base attack is at 1100 while having HP of 11,000, almost 12,000. So yeah, he's kind of like, if you want to call it in an RPG term, he is a bruiser. So you don't really want to make him too squeezy, because you most likely gonna pair him with an actual main DPS, and he's gonna be your secondary DPS that have quite some HP while also not dealing so much damage, like an okay amount of damage. So, equipment set, I would recommend, like if you want to build him, obviously go for the highest speed possible that you can, and then give him a little bit of attack and a little bit of HP. You can just balance this number out, and then critical rate and critical damage also if you do want to deal more damage. But if you do aim for him to become a bruiser, I don't recommend you going for the critical damage. Like you won't have enough stats to go around, so just increasing his critical rate is enough. So HP bonus, attack bonus, and critical rate is alright. And accuracy, try to get as high as possible. Like 80% accuracy is needed in here, because he already have a very low chance of inflicting something in here, so you don't want this chance to get reduced because you have low accuracy. And that's the only thing I can give you on tips and tricks on DAYLON. Like just remember, he is the only esper that can remove debuffs from all of his enemies. So probably in the future, probably not, we will never know. So that's it for DAYLON. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.